If everyone wants to come back over and start taking your seats, we'll give everybody a couple minutes and then we'll get started. We're going to continue our afternoon. We're going to ask Deepak to begin and just help us get settled and grounded for just a couple minutes. And then we're going to move on from the scientific side and move on more to the emotional side. And we have some really amazing speakers and panelists that we're really excited to continue to chat with and that are here with us. And thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here. So I'm going to pass it over and back to Dr. Chopra here to continue the afternoon. So thanks so much, guys.
Okay, so we never actually move away from the scientific side, right?
I said that. Sorry. I misspoke and I thought that as I said it. Thank you, Deepak.
Yeah, we like to look at everything and make sure it is, in a way, scientific, right? So before we start, let's reinforce our 4 intentions. Please close your eyes and put your awareness in your body. And just repeat those words that we used this morning, which is joyful, energetic body. First intention. Joyful, energetic body. Joyful, energetic body. Now bring your awareness to your heart. Loving, compassionate heart. Loving, compassionate heart. Bring your awareness to your third eye, the area between your eyebrows. Reflective, alert mind. Reflective, alert mind. And now let your awareness move away from your body and pervade all of space-time. Lightness of being, lightness of spirit. A few times, lightness of spirit. And now just to ground yourself, bring your awareness back into your body. And take a few seconds before you open your eyes. Okay, so now we are ready to start our afternoon panel. We have some very distinguished people here. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to you. And the topic this afternoon is the role of inflammation, emotion, pain, suffering, how they're connected. And we'll start with Bernardo Castro, whom you heard this morning as well. Okay, Bernardo, but say a few things about yourself.
Okay. I'm a computer engineer by education and philosopher. I've been doing philosophy for several years now. When I was asked to come to this event, which is about pain and inflammation, I thought, well, I don't really have a medical background. I know a few things about different areas, but this is one I don't really know much about. What could I contribute? And then it came to me a distinction that Deepak makes in his work, the differentiation between pain and suffering, that these are different things. And I thought, I'm not at all an expert on pain, but being a human being qualifies me as an expert on suffering, I think, like the rest of you. So I thought I might contribute an angle to that. Just to recap, pain is something physical. It's something of the moment. Even if it is very overwhelming, the fact that it is something of the moment, in a sense, gives it a kind of lightness, or like Milan Kundera would say, an unbearable lightness of being, because it's something that is with you now, but it doesn't extend itself into the past and into the future. Suffering or despair, which is the word I would prefer to use, is psychological. It has a gravitas, it has a weight, it goes into the past and it goes into the future, and it comes from the storytelling that we have in our own minds about what the pain means. I was a bad person and I'm being punished, or my pain means that I'm going to die and my life has no meaning anymore. All these stories that we tell ourselves, and that's the suffering, and there is a heaviness to it. And I was contemplating about this, and I thought, where does the suffering come from? What enables this? And I think what enables it is something Deepak also talks a lot about. He just talked about it right now. Self-reflectiveness, which is this human ability to turn our thoughts and feelings into objects of thought. So we think about our thoughts, we conceptualize ourselves as entities, and we think about our past, and we think about our future. By being able to self-reflect, to not only experience, but to know that we experience, and that's the characteristic of self-reflection. Beyond experience, you know that you experience. If you can do that, you can weave all these storylines, and then you suffer, and then you are in despair. And I brought some notes because I wanted to quote some people who are a lot wiser than I am, and who thought about that. There is one philosopher, a Danish philosopher from the 19th century, called Søren Kierkegaard. And he pinned it down. His conclusion was that we are reflectiveness. The notion of the me as an entity that has a story, has a narrative, is a result of self-reflection. I'll quote him. He says, the relation to himself, a man cannot get rid of. This relation to himself is self-reflectiveness. He cannot get rid of it any more than he can get rid of himself, which moreover is one and the same thing, since the self is the relationship to oneself. So he's saying the self is the very self-reflectiveness, is the very story of the me. And then he says, to have a self, to be a self, is the greatest concession made to man. But at the same time, it is eternity's demand upon him. So he's bringing in these two aspects of self-reflectiveness. On the one hand, because we can self-reflect, through us, the universe can reflect upon itself. There is no other way for that to happen. It is through us that the universe actualizes itself, reflects upon itself. So we provide a great service to nature, but we pay a huge price, and that's suffering, and that is despair. We have known this for at least 2,500 years. And I say this because if you read with the right eyes, it is in the Bible. It is in the Old Testament. I'll read a passage for you. Before they ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, Adam and Eve, and I'll quote, were both naked and were not ashamed. Supposedly, they experienced their nakedness, but they were not ashamed. Why? Because they didn't know that they were naked, even though they experienced the nakedness. They were not self-reflective. So we fell as humans. The Bible continues, the serpent telling Eve, when you eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, your eyes will be opened. The opening of the eyes, the fall into self-reflection. And there is no doubt left, because in Genesis 3:6-7, the Bible says, so when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired, to make one wise, what is wisdom? She took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. We fell into self-reflectiveness. That's the original sin. That's the fall into suffering. What enables us to self-reflect is what we call symbolic cognition. We can think in terms of symbols. You can think of symbols as words, things that represent something else. And because we can think in language, we think symbolically. And you can ask yourself, when did that happen? When did we fall into despair? When did we fall into self-reflection? And the place to look is paleoanthropology. And it so happens that one of the world's top experts is here from New York. His name is Ian Tattersall. He is the curator of the Hall of Human Origins of the American Museum of Natural History, which is here, not far from here. And in a book he published in 2012, he says, as far as Homo sapiens is concerned, it appears that body form was one thing, while the symbolic cognitive system that distinguishes us so greatly from all other creatures was entirely another. The two were not acquired at the same time, and the earliest anatomical Homo sapiens appear right now to have been cognitively indistinguishable from Neanderthals and other contemporaries. What he's saying is that when we fell, we didn't fall into humanness, we fell as humans. We fell into self-reflection after we were already anatomically humans. He continues to express the great mystery that this implies. He says, our ancestors made an almost unimaginable transition from non-symbolic, non-linguistic way of processing and communicating information about the world to the symbolic and linguistic condition we enjoy today. The fall into symbolic thinking, into self-reflection, into suffering, the original sin, all that, whatever you want to call it, whatever metaphor you prefer. It is a qualitative leap in cognitive state unparalleled in history. And then he says something remarkable. He says, indeed, the only reason we have for believing that such a leap could ever have been made is that it was made. And the reasoning behind this is that we developed our ability to think symbolically tens of thousands of years before it had any use whatsoever. It could only be used with the development of language, which was tens of thousands of years after the hardware supposedly was in place. What this means is that not only did this arise by chance, and we hear this a lot in evolutionary biology, right, that the mutations are random, so it arises by chance, but the mutations get either fixed or discarded, not by chance. They get fixed or discarded by natural selection, because there are selective pressures in the environment. What he's saying here is that because this particular mutation was with us before it ever had any use for tens of thousands of years, it got fixed also by chance. It is a near miracle that this happened. So the thought I want to leave you with is that our greatest gift is also our greatest reason for pain and suffering. And we have no idea how this happened. We know that it happened to us, probably to us alone. We know that it has great meaning and significance. We know that we pay an enormous price for it, and we do not understand how it came about. I'll leave it at this.
First of all, thank you, Bernardo. That was totally brilliant. I don't know how many of you totally got it, but I'm going to try and extrapolate from that, and then I'll come to you, Paul. Bernardo used the word symbolic. Okay. So, as human beings, what we experience are symbols of reality. And we create those symbols of reality through language. Anytime you use a word, that's a symbol or a description of an experience. So far, so good? Okay. Now, deep history also tells us that up until 30,000 years ago or 40,000 years ago, whatever, there were about 8 different types of humans. So we are Homo sapiens, which, by the way, means the wise ones, and we gave ourselves that name. Okay? But then we gave names to other humans, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthal, Homo floresiensis, on and on. So let's say that the human family had 8 different species. Just like the cat family has cats, your house cat, a panther, a tiger, a lion, they're all the same family, but they don't mate with each other because they're different species. So think of 8 human types, some this big, some this big, but they all looked like this somewhat. And they were naked, by the way. They didn't wear clothes. And they were moved in packs, just like other mammals sometimes, like wolves move in packs and monkeys move in packs. And the pack always had a leader. Okay, so there was a pack leader. And the pack leader, whether we like it or not, was always a male. And the reason the pack leader was male is they lived in a dangerous environment. You either killed or you ran or you lived through violence, basically. So the pack leader was a male. No pack leader could get more than 100 people to follow him. There was no her as a pack leader. Then one species, us, and they had a very primitive, rudimentary language. Okay, very primitive rudiment. Fire, water, food. One species, Homo sapiens, develop a language for symbolic, first, gossip. So gossip is the original storytelling. And by the way, it's still the most important storytelling. What kinds of newspapers do you buy? Tabloid. It's the most famous, biggest fascination of human beings is gossip. So-and-so sleeping with so-and-so, so-and-so can be trusted, so-and-so can't be trusted. But as soon as stories started to express symbolically what we call experience, that changed the whole game. Now the leader who could tell the best story became the pack leader. So a monkey, you go to a monkey and you say, give me a banana and banana heaven, you'll get 1 million monkeys. Doesn't work. But you go to a human being and you say, you do this, and you'll go to heaven and you'll get all these benefits. It works. So we started creating stories, and stories created theology, philosophy, religion, ultimately science. Science is also a story, a symbolic story. So that created what we call human civilization, if we can call it that. Because everything that you experience is a story. New York is a story. Even your body is a story. Okay? Money is a story. Commerce is a story. Wall Street is a story. There's nothing inherently real about Wall Street, money, latitude, longitude, nation states, religion, ethnic identity. Everything that we use words for is a symbolic expression for a story. So it created what we call this human experience. But it also created suffering. Because now the story also included, who am I? What do I want? Do I have to get old? Will I get infirm? Will I die? Is there a God? Does the soul exist? So that created the other side of the story, what we call existential suffering. Now, towards the end of this panel, I'll come to what Bernardo so eloquently quoted from the Bible to what the Buddha said about suffering. But it's exactly what you said. But I'll come back to that, okay? So with that, I want to talk. First, Paul will introduce himself. He's the director, of course, of the research at the Chopra Foundation. He's a professor at UCSD Medical School. We are family, and all the research is done under the supervision of Paul Mills, Dr. Paul Mills. But before I give it over to him, Paul, since we're talking about symbolic experience, we recently had a study published on non-symbolic experience. Okay, and that is something do remember to address.
I'll address that, yes. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And Deepak shared with you my various positions. And I want to speak about the world of psychoneuroimmunology. I suspect many of you have heard of this. Can I have a raise of hands? So this is the field that was nascent about 30 years ago. And at the time, it was a very revolutionary idea. And the idea was that the mind and the nervous system and the immune system are all interconnected. And this has been a fascinating area for me, and I've been working in it for many, many years. And it's highly relevant to this theme today of pain and emotion. And I want to share with you one of the earliest experimental paradigms in the field of P&I that elegantly demonstrated how the immune system very much influences our emotions. Not only our emotions, but our sense of social connectivity. So to do it, I want to do an experiment, and I'm hoping Fred will be willing to be a volunteer. It's an imaginary experiment, okay? So there's a paradigm in P&I that's called experimental endotoxemia. And here's how it works. So Fred, if you were coming to my lab to participate in this study, you would sit down comfortably the way you are now, and we would draw a blood sample. And then I'd also have you, Fred, fill out some questionnaires on your mood. Do you feel depressed or are you happy? Do you feel anxiety? There are also standardized questionnaires on sense of social connectivity. So I would have you complete all those, and then we would begin the actual next part of the experiment. And that part of the experiment is in giving you a very brief infusion of what's called LPS. LPS stands for lipopolysaccharide, and it's actually a component of the outer membrane of certain bacteria, including E. coli. And when that fragment of LPS would enter into your bloodstream and start circulating, your immune cells would recognize it, and it would launch an immune response, similar to if we get a cold in the middle of the winter or a flu. It activates the system. So you wouldn't know whether you got the LPS or a placebo injection. And then over the next couple of hours, we would draw blood samples, and we would also have you complete some questionnaires. What these studies, which were first done maybe 17, 18 years ago, showed is that you would start feeling depressed within approximately 30 minutes after the infusion. And that depressed mood will last for several hours. Your sense of anxiety would go up. And also, your sense of social connectedness would go down. In fact, some of the experiments have people look at photographs of people who have different emotions. So it's, happy, sad. Your ability to distinguish between whether that person has a happy face or a sad face or an angry face would go down. So the point of these experiments is it showed how elegantly that through LPS, you've activated the immune system, and your mood started tanking. And also, if we looked at the blood samples, you would find inflammatory cytokines, TNF, IL-6, these standard things had all begun to rise. So this was some of the earliest really elegant studies demonstrating these relationships. There have been many, many more over time. The last year or two, someone coined an entirely new term of a field that exists within P&I, and it's called affective immunology, which is just showing more and more of this linkage. In fact, many people feel that what we call the immune system in some ways is our emotional body, with help from regions in the brain, the insula, and others. But that there's this linkage, much as the way that the immune system links with the nervous system. They share receptors of different peptides and adrenergic receptor system, for example. So this topic of inflammation and emotion, it's very relevant because it's real, and we all go through it. Sickness behavior. If we get a cold, do you feel like going out on Broadway here in town, or do you want to go home and cuddle up and spend some time by yourself? It's more the latter. And that's what happens when our immune system gets activated in a certain way. So there's that piece I wanted to share. I could speak a little bit about the paper. Would you like that?
I would like that, but also P&I for me became psycho-neuro-endocrinology endocrine immunology.
Yes.
So because your endocrine system is also connected to the immune system.
Agreed. That is a better, more full term. And when this field was launching, there were actually people advocating P&I, and then were those who were advocating PNEI to get the endocrine system in. And clearly the ones who did PNI won, and they created the journal, the Psychoneuroimmunology Research Society, and the journal is Brain, Behavior, and Immunity. But slowly the endocrine's been trying to creep back in, appropriately so.
So do talk about two studies, because they're both published. One is the gratitude study, and the other is the non-dual study.
Great. Thanks for asking about the gratitude. So this is really relevant to our topic, and it's the topic being emotion and inflammation. So a very dominant research area for me for many, many years has been studying heart failure. Heart failure it's a cardiovascular disease. It's considered the end stage of cardiovascular disease. And what happens in heart failure is the heart loses its capacity to function properly and really infuse the body with blood. And our interest in the topic of gratitude led us a couple of years ago to run a study that we published last year on gratitude. And the question was, if we taught patients to increase their sense of trait gratitude in their life, and we did this through journaling. We had some journaling exercise this morning. Could that help them in their physical functioning and even in their inflammation? So the study design was we took a group of patients, we randomized some of them to journal on gratitude for 2 months, and the others were randomized to just maintaining their treatment as usual. Those patients who journaled on gratitude, 2 or 3 things per day they were grateful for. It could have been the weather in San Diego, which is always worth noting. It could have been their cardiologist, who knows, family. Those patients who were in the experimental group had about a 22% drop in inflammation in their body. And this was inflammatory biomarkers relevant to cardiac functioning itself. So it was an incredibly powerful demonstration on the side of gratitude, which is a whole nother discussion. But
so once again, there's no drug that'll do that for your heart. No drug known that'll do that to your heart. Huh? Yeah, that drop in inflammatory markers.
And related to that, and related to the theme of the panel, is their depressed mood, which a lot of the patients do carry for a variety of reasons, including the inflammatory load. Their mood improved. They became less depressed. And we also measured just cardiac functioning through something called heart rate variability, and that improved. So that was the one study on gratitude. It's just a remarkable demonstration of the power of our mind, or some of the forces that exist within us: gratitude, empathy, compassion, love, to transform our biology.
So once again, maybe Paul won't say this because he designed the study, but it's a brilliantly designed study. But following that study, now everybody's looking at what happens to the brain, what happens to gene expression, what happens to the microbiome. If you just, at the end of the day, you complete the following sentence: I am grateful for, and then just write down whatever comes to your mind. That'll change your endocrine system, your immune system, your inflammatory markers, and your neural networks. This is all being published thanks to pioneering study that Paul designed.
Thank you. So getting back to this topic of non-symbolic consciousness that Bernardo spoke, I'll now move on to this paper we just published a couple of months ago, I think. So at the Chopra Center for Wellbeing, we conducted a randomized clinical trial, and we're just starting to publish some of these findings. And the trial was this. It took place at a resort center, and we randomized about 60, 70 people to have an immersion in Ayurveda. Okay, and those of you who are familiar with that, it's a comprehensive whole-person lifestyle intervention, we could say. And then we randomized the other group to just have literally a vacation at the resort, and they could do whatever they want: relax, swim, golf, etc. We've published a number of papers just on the change in their biology, gene expression, metabolomics, sense of spirituality, connectedness, and gratitude was something we also included in this study. One of the questionnaires we published on was on this term non-dual awareness. Non-dual awareness is specifically regarding this concept of symbolic language and how we perceive the world. How many of you are familiar with this term non-dual awareness and non-duality? It comes out of the East. It's a reasonable term. It's not a great term in my opinion. It basically is describing the field of non-separation, the perception, the experience of non-separation. And another, I think, better way to say it is it's a person's experience of oneness. It's the knowingness, the perception, the experience that they do not exist as a separate person from anyone around them, from these walls, from the buildings, from the air itself, the moon. It's a perception and a knowing that they are one with everything. And Deepak's prior book, You Are the Universe, it's basically living that state that you literally know that that is true. I am the universe. There's nothing that is in existence that is not myself. So we gave a questionnaire to tap into this. There's always the question of full validity of questionnaires, particularly when you're trying to tap into a concept such as this. But actually, it was a reasonably done questionnaire. And the questionnaire showed that those people who were on the Ayurvedic immersion had much increased scores on this questionnaire on the topic of non-dual awareness. And basically what it means is, as a result of the course, and this lasted for a month later when the course was over, their sense of personal self had diminished. Their sense of connectedness to people around them, to the environment, to the world around them had increased significantly. In some ways, there's less sense of self-reflection and less rumination on self. They're just more in the direct experience of the moment. And that's really where, from my point of view, that's where the peace of living resides, when you're more living in the moment without the rumination of the mind. So this was another study that came out of this SBTI project, and we have some more publications to go.
So this morning, I asked you to be aware, right? I asked you to be aware of that which is having the experience. And I also gave you examples. This is a shoe. So when you say this is a shoe, that's a symbolic experience. When you experience color in your own being, and you don't need to symbolize it, it's you. So, non-dual philosophers say, when you see yourself in an object, any object, that's beauty. When you see yourself in another person, that's love. And non-duality is persistent, non-dual experiences in the ultimate, right?
Yes, it's a state of experience that never diminishes. You know yourself to be that continuously, day, night.
In that experience, there's no fear of death because you're everything. It's real. Okay? The universe is in you. That's the experiment with a meditation we did. So that's another very remarkable study that Paul thought of. And now other people are wanting to replicate that study as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't actually think about it. You and Rudy really designed it, and I helped implement it. But this topic of non-duality is something we're focusing on a lot in some of our writing because the Chopra Center is the Chopra Center for Well-Being. In my world in behavioral medicine, I focused for many years on the topic of well-being. The scientific literature has expanded the last few years. There's an area called positive psychology. Probably some of you have heard about it. It's studying things such as gratitude and how do these forces and factors contribute to our well-being. But we're going to start writing more about, as scientifically as we can, about what is the ultimate, contribution of non-dual awareness to well-being, with the idea that that is the true foundation of well-being. Because if you don't fully know yourself to be more than just the mind-body, then how much well-being could you really inherently carry? And I'd say it's limited without that.
Fred, would you like to comment after hearing these?
Yes, thank you. To more or less extent, we all are part of the SBTI experience, and I've been privileged enough 3 years ago to be one of the people to be in the group that really every day for 6 days, we did it together, Susan, and Alice was there, to go through being taught and do this. And honestly, I could not remember after those 6 days to ever have felt that well. So that encouraged me, although it's a process of 5 steps forward and 4 steps back, really to do it. That's one observation and an experience. What I'd like to also ask, talking about pain and suffering, we all, being here, came through the birth canal. How many of you are mothers? Can you stay? So, I'm not a mother. So, I only had the pleasure side of it before something happened. I have 3 daughters. Now, who of you like to reflect on what is the experience of giving birth? So that would be the first question. Did you experience pain? Was there suffering involved? Was there gratitude? So who likes to share that with us? And what perhaps can you take and share with us from point of what has it meant to you?
Hello, my name is Victoria Benatar. I live in New York and I'm an architect, mother of 1. When I got pregnant, I was very happy for that, not knowing what was coming ahead, especially give birth to a child. And I wanted to do it naturally, but I couldn't. I was screaming of pain and screaming of pain. And the doctor came and gave me the pedidural. But that didn't stop my pain. I was having this sensation of big pain with a big, how you call that? It was like a kind of an orgasm, like a pleasure. It was a pleasurable pain that. And when I saw my daughter and I started crying, and it changed my life as a woman. The fact of having birth, it changed my life, and from that moment on, you feel like what we're talking about, the thing of the duality, and it has been a good journey. It makes me becoming a better person. You want me to talk more about?
Well, so I understand the pain got a meaning for you because in the
Yeah.
meantime you had a paradox of pleasure too.
Yes, it was strange. It was like this horrible pain, but with a sense of pleasure that I was not really expecting that happening.
Do you recognize that other women here in the room? Your description? Do you want to share with us something about your experience?
Hi, my name is Pai, and I have 2 kids, one 3-year-old boy and one 6-year-old girl. And my experience was very different. I did everything I could to give birth naturally, and I managed both of them. First one, my water broke early, so I had to take something called Pitocin, which gives you extreme pain. And during the whole night, and thanks to my husband, he was with me the whole time. So I gave birth to my first girl, and it was extremely painful. And because I wasn't breathing, at the last part, the most painful part is when the baby comes out, where the head comes out of the ring of fire, they call it. And then I got torn all the way up from the vagina to the other hole. So I couldn't sit for a long time. I was babysitting, I was breastfeeding my kid with lots of pain, having to stand up 3 or 4 times a night to pump and give to my husband to feed the baby. So more problems came with babysitting, more problems, with other things. In my second birth, I couldn't walk. I had something called like a distortion of the pelvis, so it was extremely painful. And it was very, very emotional time, very depressing times. But I didn't want to relieve the pain because I thought we are born to experience pain. Pain is part of life. If I have a pain-free birth, then what do I understand from this experience? So I let myself go through it knowing that it's going to be painful. I didn't know how much. Mm-hmm. But I thought this will, this is part of nature. Like, if we take the pain away, where are we going? Yeah. It's part of, And I realized, being so painful, I kind of turned, even the breastfeeding, which was, a whole new story here at Mount Sinai Hospital. The lactation consultant, next day morning, will tell me I have inverted nipples, I can't breastfeed. Then we had to go to a different consultant, telling me different things. Anyway, it was all good. My baby was not tongue-tied. Every little thing that came up, and I was crying for it and praying every day. And I met a doctor who was telling me, you have to visualize the breastfeeding. It comes from you. So you visualize that the milk is flowing, and it will happen. And this is what happened. And lots of pain and lots of struggle to get on the first step of motherhood, right? Yeah. And I'm a generation, my mother breastfed me for a month. Mm-hmm. I didn't have an experience or somebody who would understand it. I just had books I've read, my husband here who was supportive. And it was a whole struggle. And I was baffled, who's writing these books or telling people that this is enjoyable, this is something easy? It's and the sleepless nights that make you feel like you don't get a break.
But I hear you say, without the pain, it wouldn't have meant that much to me. Is that what I hear correctly?
Yeah,
so
I think
the pain had a lot of meaning to you.
Yeah, if I had it easy, how much I would have appreciated.
Yeah, the appreciation level, gratitude. Right? Yeah, thank you both very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred. So, towards the end, I'll ask everyone to summarize or make a couple of statements. But how many of you are familiar with the story of the Buddha? A little bit, huh? So very quickly, he was a young prince. His father wanted him to be the next emperor. He protected him, surrounded him with pleasure, never allowed him to experience suffering. Till one day, the young prince, and he was not even 20, he asked one of his friends, who was a stable boy, who was the son of the man who looked after the horses. He said, can you take me outside the palace so I can see what life is really like? Because over here, everything is beautiful. So they went outside the palace, and the first thing that he saw was a very old man. And the emperor had prevented him from seeing old age. He said, so what is that? And his friend said, that's an old man, a very old man. He said, does everybody get old? Yeah, he says, if you live a good, healthy life, you get old. So he said, will I get old? He said, of course you'll get old. If you live a long time, you'll get old. Next day, they went out again, and this time they saw a person in those days with leprosy, with a lot of infirmity, a lot of suffering. He said, what is that? And he said, that's a person with a lot of infirmity. He said, does everybody get that? He says, if you live long enough, at some point you'll be infirm. He says, will I have that experience? He said, you probably will. So that's the second episode. And the third episode is they go out, and there's a funeral procession going on, and a person is being carried for cremation. What is that? He said, that's a dead person. He says, does everybody die? He said, yes, everybody dies. So will I die? And the answer was, of course you will die. So now this young prince is experiencing self-reflection, symbolic self-reflection, and going through a deep depression. And so he sets out to find what he calls enlightenment, to go beyond suffering. And I don't know how many of you, and I'll keep this really short, how many people know the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha? Few people do? Okay, so the first noble truth is life contains suffering. Now, he's frequently misquoted as saying life is suffering. He didn't say that. In fact, he said life contains suffering, not life is suffering, because life is both pleasure and pain. Life is joy and suffering. Life is up and down. Life is hot and cold. There's no way you can have an experience unless there's something to contrast that experience with. You know pain because you also know pleasure. You know suffering because you also know joy. So that's the first noble truth. The second noble truth, which is translated in many ways, is that there are causes for suffering. There are causes for suffering. Now, he goes into a great detail about the causes of suffering, but the gist of it is that you don't really know who you truly are. You only know your symbolic story of who you are. Okay? You don't know the real essence of who you are. You're knowing the symbolic story, which is a dream. Now, bear with me just for 1 second. What happened to this morning? It's a dream now, right? What happened to your childhood? It's a dream. What happened to 5 minutes ago? It's a dream. What happened to 1 minute ago? It's a dream. And by the time you hear my words, the words I uttered are over. So Wittgenstein, another German philosopher, he said, our life is a dream. We are asleep. But once in a while, we wake up enough to know that we're dreaming. So we're dreaming all the time. Anytime you have a thought, you're dreaming. Anytime you think about the past, you're dreaming. Anytime you think about the future, you're dreaming. And what we call the lucid now, this experience is a lucid, vivid dream happening eternally in what we call the now. This is a lucid dream because what happened a second ago is now not a lucid dream. This is a lucid dream. The whole thing is a dream. So he said, you have to wake up, Buddha said. And then he prescribed, how do you wake up? Which will be the last session today. How do you wake up? What's the science of waking up? So, any further comments by anyone here?
If you give me a hint on a direction, I will come.
Well, I think it's very important to know that symbols of reality are not reality. Yeah. Okay? Every time we speak, you know what Rumi said, God's language is silence, everything else is poor translation. So when you are a non-judgmental observer, that's non-symbolic experience.
You mentioned Wittgenstein, then I will mention something about him. Wittgenstein had two halves of his academic life and his ideas. He wrote the first book, the Tractatus, and his key thesis was that language could reflect reality accurately. And
say that again?
That language would reflect or mirror reality, the reality that's out there, accurately. So you could make a copy of reality in language. And if you would make that copy accurately, then you would talk sense. And whatever couldn't be copy it like this, then you should not talk about that. That was the first half of Wittgenstein's life. In the second half, he proved that he was completely wrong. And he withdrew everything he had said before, and then he put forward this idea that language is a game. It is not really reflecting anything. It's a self-contained game. And that words only have meaning insofar as they have a space or play a role in that relative game of semantic pointings. And if you would see this truly, if you'd really grok this, then there would be nothing more to be said, and philosophy would end.
And Wittgenstein was Bertrand Russell's most brilliant student, right?
That's according to Bertrand himself, yeah.
That's beautiful, what you just said. Any other comments?
Yeah, so this topic of duality versus non-duality, dual awareness versus non-dual awareness and oneness, and related to what you were saying, the difference has to do with focusing, using too much of your awareness to be focused on thoughts, feelings, activities, particularly the thoughts and feelings of your identity. So I just encourage you to continue to bring your awareness more towards your awareness, which is something Deepak advocates
And
continuously.
just to complete that,
And
every identity you have is provisional.
yes.
Every identity you have is provisional. I'm rich, well, I could be poor tomorrow. I am young, I'll be old tomorrow. Every identity is provisional, except I am awareness.
Right. All those identities cultivate and maintain the sense of duality and separation. So overcome that, and you come back to the reality of what
I
you
think
are.
a simpler word for non-dual would be love.
May
I'm
I
on
tie-
board with that.
May I tie in here related to love? This morning I said a few words about my grandchildren and the moment before the children have language. So you can look in the eyes of the child and you can feel connected. Because you feel the child has no judgment about you. It just is. Now I wanted to invite you to be part of this experience. So if you sit together in duos, and I'll do with Paul, please feel relaxed and free and choose a partner. And take the time and patience to look one another calmly into the eyes. And try to find that moment where you allow love into yourself, as well allow it to be shining through the eyes of the other. In a way, allow yourself to be thought. Allow yourself to be felt. It's okay when you start to stare, and perhaps you go through the experience that you reside in the eyes, through the eyes, into the womb of eternity, where all duality falls away. You may get some fogginess around you and feel the unity. Take a few 10 or 20 more seconds. You may continue afterwards too. And a hug is not a bad end of this exercise.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think we officially got into the scientific, emotional side of things. Absolutely.
Good job.
We are now going to, guys, thank you so much. We appreciate you, all of you, very much. Thank you so much, Fred. Deepak, I think you get one more little break before we get deep into your mind, spirit, and conscious. Now we have a few moments with Sarah Finger, who is another one of Deepak's yoga teachers and guides. And we're just going to take a few moments where you are. Sarah's going to stretch us out and move us and guide us. So Sarah, come on up. We're so grateful for you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susie.
Yeah.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks,
Thank
Deepak.
you.
Hi, everyone. How's it going? It's been a beautiful day, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm just going to do a little bit of some seated stretches, seated movements. We've had such an informative day about the power of sound, of visual, of mind, and really what yoga and the practice that I teach, which is called Ishta Yoga, we access these tools of sound, of visual, of movement to access the part of us that is beyond and behind the story, right? The source of your being, that part of you that's nameless and shapeless and formless and eternal. And when we use the tools and techniques of yoga, we're able to access that part of us. And it's not so much about belief or, suspending ourselves to anything, but really just allowing the power of that to create a transformation. So we're going to start in a seated position. And you can rest your hands on the tops of your thighs. Close your eyes. And I'm going to ask you to take your right hand under your left armpit, your left hand under your right armpit, crisscrossing at your forearms. This is called balancing pillar breath. There's a nerve in between the 5th and 6th rib that when pressurized helps to release the opposite side nostril. And why that's important is because when the nostrils flow freely, we move into a more daydream-like state. So without forcing your breath in any way, just let your breath be breathed. Feel the natural rising and falling of your breath inside your body. Can switch the pressure of air from one side of the chest to the other by taking the hand that's on top, sliding it underneath, and then placing it under the same armpit. So you crisscross the forearms the other way. And again, let your shoulders soften your jaw, just consciously relaxing any areas of tension that are not serving you right now. Beginning the process of moving inward to that vastness. You can keep your eyes closed, rest your hands onto the tops of your thighs and bring your palms to face up, your thumb and forefinger to touch, just a hand gesture, which also affects the brain. Sensing as you happen to breathe in this electromagnetic field of awareness that enters from the top of your head down the line of your spine to just in front of your sacrum. And as you exhale, feel that awareness from just in front of your sacrum starts to charge and expand into each cell of your body. So you breathe in, you open up to receive magnetism, light, radiance. And as you exhale, you transform it into your physical body. On the inhale, the mantra, the vibration, the sound that you'll vibrate silently is sa, which is also the sound of the inhale. And the exhale vibrates silently the sound hum. So as you breathe in sa, you take this awareness, top of the head to the base of the spine. And as you exhale hum, that awareness transforms into your physical body. Now we'll move with this sound and that breath, so reaching your arms forward and up. Sa, feel that connection, top of the head to the base of the spine. Interlace your fingers, and as you exhale, hum, press your palms up, root your seat down. Breathing in, let the side ribs expand. As you exhale, lower your hands down in front of you. And we'll do that again. Reach the arms forward and up as you inhale, sa, taking in that inspiration. Bring your palms to touch. Hum, lower your hands down the midline of your body. And do this a couple of times. Reach the arms forward and up as you breathe in like you're taking in inspiration, top of the head to the base. Bring your palms to touch. Hum, transform it into your physical body. Again, sa as you inhale. The breath begins and the movement follows. Hum on the exhale as you lower your hands down the midline of your body. Reaching your arms forward and up again, sa. Feel that connection, crown to base. And now again, we'll lace the fingers as you exhale, hum. Press your palms up, root your seat down. As you inhale, lengthen a little taller and longer through your spine. As you exhale, take a gentle twist to your right. You can hold on to the back of your chair with your hand. Bring your left arm across. Right arm to the back of your chair. Yeah, and then you can, again, I'm going to invite you. You don't have to, but I'll invite you to close your eyes so that your awareness can move back inward to that spaciousness. We're no longer determining a reality through form and shape, but through sensing and feeling. Sa as you inhale, lengthening. Hum as you exhale, twisting. As you breathe in, reach your arms back up overhead. Now lace your fingers the other way, other pointer fingers in front. Press your palms up, root your seat down. Inhale, lengthen tall through your spine. Exhale, twist to the opposite side. Take your right arm across, left arm behind you. Again, you can hold on to the back of your chair. Every time you inhale, you'll feel the line of your spine grow long and tall, and as you exhale, you gently rotate around that line. So again, using the faculty of visualization of your mind to transform your consciousness. Reach your arms back up overhead, breathing in. Bring your palms to touch. As you exhale, lower your hands down the midline of your body. Lace your fingers. Reach your arms forward and round your spine. As you inhale, reach your arms straight up overhead. Feel the front ribs expand. You can even gaze up. See how that changes your perspective. Exhale, hum as you round your spine. Breathing in, arms stretch up and sa moves down. So keeping that vibration alive. And exhale, hum, distribution of energy. Join spacious. Sa as you breathe in. Feel that connection, crown to base. And hum as you breathe out. Good. So sitting right on up into an upright position. We're going to take a stand. So stand up. Tadasana, mountain pose. Bring your feet, your heels behind the widest part of your feet. And sometimes we discredit the power of this posture, the power of standing, right? Aligned in your body so that you're not hyperextending or over-tensing or over-trying. So again, I'll invite you to close your eyes and sense that you could suction the energy up through the soles of your feet. You get some stability through your legs. Feel how that creates support in your lower abdomen. Now bring your palms to face up. Feel that spaciousness across your collarbones and let your head and neck be easeful, right? So just like a bobble doll, you're not forcing your head in any particular position. And then float your right ear to your right shoulder. Relax there for a moment. Feeling as you inhale, sa. As you exhale, hum. Bring your head back to center and switch sides. Left ear to the left shoulder. Sa moves down, top of the head to the base of the spine. And hum is transformation of energy. Float your head back to center. You're going to bend the knees, reach the seat back, stretch the arms forward, like you're sitting back in your chair, but you're not actually sitting in your chair. So a little more work in your legs. Again, notice what you're doing in your jaw and your face. See if you can soften your facial muscles. And then straighten your legs as you exhale. So moving in and out of those two postures, breathing in, bend the knees, reach your seat back. Sa, feel that connection, crown to base. Exhale, hum, as you straighten the legs. And if you like, you can reach your arms up as you inhale. Sa. If that's too much on your shoulders, arms stay forward, parallel to the floor. Straighten the legs, hum. Twice more on your own. I'm just going to let you float on your own pace, connecting to your own body. No right or wrong. There's no pass or fail. Right? This is just an exploration of breath and movement. Making it really a practice of your own. I'm going to do one more chair pose. So bending your knees, reach your seat back. This pose actually means fierce. It's a fierce pose, but see if you can also feel the ease in your breath as you hold it. So you're strong and capable, right? And empowered, but at the same time, easeful, peaceful. And so embodying those two aspects. Straighten the legs, keep the arms straight up overhead, interlace your fingers, point the pointer finger straight up, reach up and over to your right, pressing into your left foot, blown palm. Root into your left foot, extending through the fingertips. Come back to center as you inhale and reach up and over to the opposite side, pressing into your right foot. Again, inhale back to center. Reach up and over to the right, pressing into your left foot. A little bit goes a long way, right? With these stretches, reach up and over to the opposite side. You don't always need a yoga mat. Come back up to center. Take your hands behind you to your lower back, so your fingertips point down. I'm going to show you from the side. And just lift through the center of your chest. So avoid pushing a lot into your lower back. Keep your abdominal muscles supporting your lower back, your lumbar spine. And opening through your chest. Open up your mouth. Notice how that changes the experience of the pose. And then come back to center. Have a seat. After that very vigorous practice. Cross your right ankle on top of your left thigh. Flex your right foot deeply. And just make little circles with your right ankle. So again, really nice to release the joints. A lot of movement in the joints helps the fluidity. And then flex the right foot. And begin to hinge at your hips. Just find that point where you feel something happening in your outer right hip. And that will vary depending on you, right? So there's not one place that we have to get to. That's why this process of closing the eyes and checking inward is so important. To just you become your own guide, your own teacher of knowing how much is too much or not enough. And then breathe there. You can stay with that sa-hum breath. Sa as you breathe in, hum as you breathe out. Slowly come back up. Release that side. Switch. Take your left ankle on top of the right thigh. Flex the foot. And circle that ankle out a little bit, releasing out the joints. You can circle the ankle in the opposite direction. So these are things if you work in an office, you can probably do at your desk, right? If you have an office desk, you can actually rest your hands on the table and start to hinge forward. So if you take breaks throughout your day, you can do some of these things. Closing your eyes. Again, targeting that area in your outer left hip. Long breaths in and out. Using your breath, your awareness, the sound. Mantra means manas, mind, trayati, to liberate. Liberating your mind with sound. And then come back up into an upright position. I'm going to scoot forward a little bit on the chair. Stretch the right leg forward. So this may or may not work depending on space. You're going to release the back of the legs. You can hinge forward. Maybe walk your hands over the front of your right thigh, your right leg. So we're being a little bit adventurous or working a little differently with the props that we have today. So you might be able to feel a stretch. Everyone feel a stretch in your right hamstring. We hold a lot of tension in the backs of our legs. It tends to be where we store a lot of our unconscious. Coming all the way back up into an upright position. Switch sides. Take the right foot in, stretch the left leg forward. Watch out for your seed bottles. And then scoot forward over your left leg. And again, breathing in and out. And then once you feel the stretch, again, you might close your eyes and just bring your awareness to that area. Because where our awareness goes, that life force energy, the prana starts to flow. And it's also just awareness creates transformation. Slowly coming back up. Take your left foot in and take one more forward bend. So now keeping your feet where they are. We'll see how this goes. I'm, again, not sure about how we are in the rows. You might need to scoot a little bit to the side to do this, but in the front row, you guys are good. So you're just going to rest your torso on your thighs and let your head drop down. So it's kind of like bringing your head below your heart. So it's a little bit like, oh, good, that worked. A little bit like an inversion without putting too much pressure on your head or your neck. And just let there be a little traction through your neck, your cervical spine. This is nice for the lower back if you have a lot of tension in your lower back. Now everybody take a big breath in. Open up your mouth and exhale. One more time. Big breath in. Open up your mouth and exhale. And then with a heavy head, begin to roll up through the spine. So your head is the last to come up. And just sitting up nice and tall. Your shoulder rolls, roll the shoulders forward and up and release them back and down. Roll the shoulders forward and up. And exhale them back and down. And once more, taking the shoulders forward and up as you breathe in. And release them back and down as you breathe out. And keeping your eyes closed, just allow your spine to lengthen tall. Just noticing those few movements, some stretches, how that shifted your ability to sit. Notice if you're sitting on the back of your tailbone and kind of collapsing and rounding your spine. See if you can find the very bottom tip of your sitting bones. Bring your left palm to face up. With the right hand, like you're pinching something very small. Pointer finger and thumb touch. And then place this hand gesture, the mudra, right at the center of your chest. Closing your eyes, you're now piercing what we call the heart chakra, the space that relates to the element of air. Visualize a light at the center of your chest. With every inhale, let the light expand. With every exhale, the light moves back to a point at the center of your chest. Breathing in, the light expands. Breathing out, back to a point at the center of your chest. As your breath starts to go a little more quiet, you can start to feel the light begin to expand out into each cell of your body. Feel each cell of your body vibrant with that light until it expands out into this aura of light around you. Sense, again, using the faculty of imagination, of visualization, that you're immersed in this radiant light. From inside. And then rest your right hand back down. Sit for a moment in your own radiance, your own luminosity. Bringing your palms to touch. Place the tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth. And bow your head down. Surrendering to the light. I love the wisdom that's there. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. What
My
a
pleasure.
special treat.
No, it's a treat for me.
We're going to continue on this journey into stillness and breathing and connected to music with Eddie again, who we're so grateful to you, Eddie, for continuing to guide us today. After Eddie, we are going to get to have a special keynote by Deepak. So Eddie's going to set us up for Deepak's keynote. But first, please join me and for a super special, do you want to tell us a little bit actually about the app that you and Deepak created first and then guide us for a little bit? Amazing, thank you.
Does Deepak want to join me? Sure. No, thanks. Okay, so.
These Sarah and Eddie are my teachers, so I have to listen.
That's what he says. Actually, the opposite. So this breathing exercise we're going to do now is called resonance breathing. And we're going to be using an app that Deepak and I created together. The genesis started about 3 years ago when I was actually in Amsterdam. And Deepak and I were sending articles back and forth, studies on the vagus nerve and all the things that the vagus nerve controls. So you heard Naveen spoke about the vagus nerve today. And one of the very important things that the vagus nerve does is, aside from being the nerve of emotion that helps to regulate our vocal expression and our facial expressions, it also helps to control inflammation. So when Ash was speaking this morning about inflammation being a natural response of the immune system to heal, when that response doesn't turn off, then it becomes harmful and it begins to drive inflammation to cause a bunch of other problems. We can have body pain, we can have increased anxiety, we can have problems with digestion, it can push towards particular types of cancers, a whole host of problems. So one of the things that the resonance breathing does is it begins to activate the off switch of the vagus nerve so that it downregulates that part of our nervous system which is pushing inflammation, which is the sympathetic branch. So resonance is basically a term which means when things when two or more things begin to operate in harmony with each other. So one of the particular things about the resonance breathing is that, as everyone knows how many times you naturally breathe per minute? How many? Too many times per minute. We naturally breathe about 15 or 18 times per minute during our waking state. When we're sleeping, we begin to breathe a little bit slower. In the waking state, we're always moving a little bit towards activity. When we begin to move towards the load coming from the world towards us too much, and it becomes too much to handle, then the breathing naturally starts to speed up even a little more. Maybe we're breathing 18 to 20 breaths per minute. And this is like a mild state of constant anxiety that a lot of people experience. So in resonance breathing, we begin to consciously slow the breathing down to less than half of that, anywhere from 5 to 7 breaths per minute. And so the app that we created basically will guide you in this paced breathing to help you slow the breath down. So naturally, when we breathe, when we inhale, the heart rate speeds up a little. When we exhale, the heart rate slows down a little. And this is called heart rate variability. And Paul talked about this as well, and Deepak spoke about this earlier too. The heart rate variability, when the heart speeds up as we inhale and slows down as we exhale, is basically a snapshot of what's happening in our autonomic nervous system. So when the heart doesn't speed up and slow down with the breathing, then we know that the sympathetic nervous system is turned on and it needs to be turned off a little bit. So you can imagine that the sympathetic nervous system is like the accelerator of a car. When we have too much stress, what happens is the accelerator is pushed down and the braking mechanism is temporarily impaired. So what we want to do is we want to get the braking mechanism to work again. The braking mechanism is the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is going to be stimulated by the breathing, especially by conscious paced breathing. So Deepak was also speaking about this earlier, saying that we can begin to stimulate the vagus nerve, specifically the vagal brake, through yoga and through meditation, and through breathing that we'll be doing now. Okay, everybody with me? Okay, not too complicated, right? Deepak, anything to add?
No, you mentioned the breathing app, so if you want to download it, it's free. It's called the Breathing App.
I always forget to mention that. It's on Android and on iOS, and it is, as Deepak said, completely free. So a little bit more about that after. So I'll give you a couple small instructions. Number one, this is not pranayama. This is not deep breathing. It's very smooth breathing. So there's going to be a sound which we're going to breathe along to, which was created by the musician Moby. And we're going to inhale with one of the sounds and exhale with the other. You can rest back in your chair. You can put your hands on your belly if you'd like to, because you want your belly to come out a little as you inhale and go in a little as you exhale. And what this is doing is it's massaging the afferent nerves that are contained within the entire gut. So earlier we heard about, especially from Naveen, about how in the microbiome in the gut we have all of these different nerve endings for the immune system. And so we're going to be massaging these nerve endings very gently through the breathing. So we're strengthening vagal tone, we are balancing and massaging the immune system nerve endings. Many, many things are happening with this breath. So main thing to remember, you don't have to breathe deeply, you just want to breathe smoothly. If at any time you feel any tension during the breathing, just pause, listen to the sounds for a couple of minutes, and if you feel that the breath is a little bit too long for you, then you can just try to catch one of the exhales every once in a while or one of the inhales. I'll give you some guidance as we go through it. Okay? Shall we begin, please? So just listen to the sound for 1 or 2 cycles before you start breathing along with it. Position which is comfortable, either sitting up straight or leaning back in your chair. Giving yourself a few minutes to settle into the breathing rhythm. The breath smooth with the sound. Softening the corners of the eyes. And the outer edges of the mouth. Just another minute or so more. then you can let your breathing relax. And we'll conclude with one long inhale and a long, slow exhale. Okay, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Everybody good? Good. So that was about 7 minutes. It goes by quickly. It said that if you do this for 7 to 10 minutes a day, in about 5 weeks, you'll change your baseline response to stress and your baseline immune system response as well. But in light of what's coming next with Deepak also, the paced breathing in this way is affecting the brain stem, where the autonomic nervous system is contained, which is controlling respiration and blood pressure and a host of other autonomic nervous system functions. So in yoga, what happens is we use breathing to begin to gain a certain measure of control over the autonomic functions of the nervous system, because it's in the brainstem where all of our survival functions are contained. And our survival functions are linked to our fear of death, and the fear that comes up, the little fears that come up throughout the day. So as we begin to gain a measure of control over the survival functions, fear and the associated stories that we have wrapped up in fear begin to diminish as well. So this is one way to not only gain a measure of control over heart rate variability and vagal nerve function, but also to begin to prepare yourself to loosening the bonds of fear that allow you to move into deeper states of meditation more readily. Thank you very much. Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you so much, Eddie. Sarah into Eddie into Deepak is pretty much the most amazing trio out there. So feeling super grateful right now for that. Deepak, this is for you. And we all know who Deepak is, obviously, but I do just want to take a moment again to say thank you, Deepak, for helping us create this day and this weekend. It's very, very special. And thank you, Fred, and the Fred Foundation as well.
And thank you, Susie, for organizing it.
Thank you. Thank you. We all know Deepak, but it is super, super special to be able to spend an entire day with him, guiding us through meditation and chats and talks and one-on-ones and all of these things. And I know a lot of us are super excited to get to hear him guide us through this chat. And Deepak's here to talk to us about the enlightened brain. And as Eddie just mentioned, we just experienced some action. And now Deepak's here to talk to us a little bit about some of the work that he's done and some of the research that he's done at the Chopra Foundation at the Chopra Center. Deepak, we're really excited about this. I think we're ready to put his slides up. And Deepak, you've got your clicker, so thank you again.
Thank you. I don't see Bernardo, but he may have taken a break. He gave me an idea of how to actually talk about the brain even. So Bernardo, I hope, I don't know if you'll agree with this definition of the brain. The brain is a symbolic representation of mind. I agree. You agree. Thank you. So is your body a symbolic representation of your mind, and so is the world that you experience. But the mind is not what you are. You are consciousness that experiences itself as mind, body, and that which we call universe. Once again, the brain is the symbolic representation of your mind, so is the body, and so is the world. But you are neither the brain, nor the body, nor what we call the experience of the world. You're the consciousness in which this experience occurs. So if we had to define consciousness, I'll use Rupert Spira's definition. Consciousness is that in which all experience occurs. This experience is happening in consciousness. So consciousness is that in which all experience occurs. It is also that in which all experience is known. You're having this experience, but you also know that you're having this experience. And the third part is, consciousness is that out of which all experience is made, including the experience of mind, body, and the world. Now, I, of course, have a background not only in science and neuroscience. My background is also in the great spiritual traditions of the East, which have a lot to do with trying to understand consciousness and states of experience. So right now, the state that you are experiencing is what we call now. The lucid dream, this is the vivid now, what we're experiencing. This is a particular frequency of consciousness. When you go to sleep at night, you experience another frequency of consciousness. We call it the dream, the regular dream, the night dream. Also, whenever you're thinking, when you're caught up in thought or daydream, you're not in the lucid dream. This is the lucid dream. And then when you go to sleep and deep sleep, then all dreaming stops. You're in pure consciousness, non-symbolic. In deep sleep, no symbols of consciousness. This is an experience that people will have, everybody has. All animals have this experience. All humans have this experience. Actually, I'm reading a book right now on sleep. Even plants have the experience of sleep and wakefulness. I don't know if they dream, but plants definitely have the experience of sleep and wakefulness. Even embryos, so when you're in the womb, you're dreaming. Now, I don't know what you're dreaming about. Of course, in the East, they say you're dreaming about other lifetimes, but we won't go into that right now. But even in the womb, the embryo dreams, after a certain stage of development. Here are some principles that come to us from Eastern wisdom traditions, the Vedanta, which are very important, and because we're talking about the enlightened brain. So in the Eastern wisdom traditions, everybody goes through this cycle every day of waking, dreaming, sleeping. Everybody. But a few of us are lucky to go beyond. So the first three states of consciousness are called waking, sleeping, dreaming. Or waking, dreaming, sleeping, whatever way you want to sequence them. The fourth state of consciousness in the Eastern wisdom traditions is called just being aware. Or it's called transcendental consciousness. Or you can even, if you want to, as a compromise, you can call it soul consciousness. So soul consciousness is when you become aware of who's dreaming. And we practiced that this morning when I said, just turn your attention to that which is listening. You can do it right now. Turn your attention to that which is listening. And that still presence you feel is the fourth state of consciousness. The more you experience this still presence, the more insight, the more intuition, the more creativity, the more refined your imagination will become, and you'll also experience synchronicity. Synchronicity means meaningful coincidences, because at the level of awareness, you're connected to everything, all that exists. So that's the fourth state of consciousness. Because of simplicity, let's just call it soul consciousness. Easier than transcendental or whatever. So soul consciousness. The fifth state of consciousness is when this dreamer, this awareness, is fully awake in sleeping, dreaming, and wakefulness. It's getting a little complicated. So when you're aware of the presence of being, the presence of being in sleeping, in waking, and in dreaming. That's called the fifth state of consciousness. And in the wisdom traditions of the East, it's called cosmic consciousness. So why is it called cosmic consciousness? Because that which we call awareness is non-local. Non-local means it's not in time. Why is it non-local and not in time? Because it has no form. Your being has no form. Your soul has no form. Right now, without that being, you wouldn't be having this experience. Now, when that presence of being is fully awake in waking, dreaming, and sleeping, that's the simultaneity of local and non-local consciousness. Is this too complicated? So, your body is fast asleep, in deep sleep, but there's an awareness that is aware of the body in deep sleep. Or your body-mind is dreaming, but there's an awareness of the dream state in that dream state. Or your body-mind is in New York City, but you as a witnessing awareness are watching your body-mind and all other body-minds in this New York City. In other words, the presence of awareness never leaves you, whether you're fast asleep or you're dreaming or you're fully awake. This is called simultaneity of local and non-local awareness. And when we have in the Sanskrit words for it, so the fourth stage is called Turiya, the fifth stage is called Turiya Tatta. You probably know this, Eddie. So it's the fifth stage is cosmic consciousness. You can say the spiritual being is always aware of being a spiritual being having a human experience. The Christian theologian, Teilhard de Chardin, he said we are spiritual beings having a human experience. That sounds kind of very religious. If you don't want to sound religious, you can say, I'm a non-local being having a local experience. Okay? You're a non-local, spiritual, timeless being. When that becomes part of your reality, then you're in cosmic consciousness. You're simultaneously, again, to use a Christian principle, because Christian dogma has these principles too. I'm in the world, but not of it. I'm in the world as this body-mind, but not of it as the spirit that is projecting this world, as this body-mind experience. Cosmic consciousness. And as we move from the fourth stage, which is called Turiya, to Turiya Tatta, then those experiences of synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, being at the right place at the right time, what people normally call being lucky. Okay, you say, but spiritual traditions don't use that word. If you're religious, you say, God is on my side. If you want to be more secular, you say, I'm experiencing synchronicity. And if you want to use other terms, you can say meaningful coincidence. Or a nice spiritual term is the state of grace, where you feel you're blessed. Not because it's an obligation, but because you feel that way. Everything works the way it should work. Life is lightness of being, more intuition. So that's called the fifth state. What comes after 5? Sixth. So the sixth state is called divine consciousness. Or if you want, and people these days are okay with it, I move in a lot of circles, some secular, some religious, some atheist. In fact, I'm doing a debate with the atheists on this Wednesday in New York City. You can look it up on the internet, so it would be very interesting to talk to the most well-known atheists of the world. So they don't like the word divine or God or whatever. So when I talk to them, I called it refined non-local consciousness. But forget about that right now. Divine consciousness is where that witnessing awareness that you're already experiencing, you start to experience it in other people. So I start to experience awareness in me, but then also in you. and in every object of perception. And so, as Eastern wisdom traditions say, God is not difficult to find now. God is impossible to avoid. Wherever you go, you feel the presence of spirit. Now, in Eastern wisdom traditions, this is also the realm of miracles, when they say everything becomes a miracle. The fact that we exist is a miracle. Okay. So, this is the realm of miracles. This is called Bhagavat Chetna, after Turiya Tata. Sixth state. And then the final state of existence in Eastern wisdom traditions is called enlightenment. Enlightenment, which is the seventh state, is also referred to as unity consciousness. In Sanskrit, it's called Brahmi consciousness, Brahman consciousness. So what's that state? Well, there's the internal realization that the awareness in me is not only the awareness in you, but it's the awareness in all existence. In other words, there's only one awareness. There are different minds, there are different bodies. The minds are the conditioning of awareness, but awareness is one. You can use any word for that: unity, consciousness, or God, or Ein Sof, or Allah, or that's all up to you, or none of them. Just there's a single awareness. You and I are differentiated expressions of that single awareness. Like all these light bulbs are a single electricity, but these are different expressions. Okay, so there's a single awareness, and we are differentiated expressions of that one awareness. And so what happens in unity consciousness, all these differentiations disappear, and you realize you are that awareness, and this whole universe is you. Everybody on board? Now, how can we show this a little bit scientifically? Because we live in the scientific age. So if you look at my hand right now, in this way, this is what UCLA neuropsychiatrist Dan Siegel calls a handy model of the brain. Handy model of the brain. So this is my midbrain, the reptilian brain, which is also called the instinctive brain, because it protects us from disaster, from danger. It's always on alert. You know, if you make a sudden noise or you make a sudden movement in a reptile, it'll attack you or it'll run. That's called the fight-flight response, which today we call it stress, okay, which is mediated by an overactive reptilian brain. If I open my hand up, you see where my thumb is? That's the emotional brain, or also called the limbic brain, which we talked about this morning in the last session. Okay, healthy emotions: love, compassion, joy, equanimity. Unhealthy emotions: fear, hostility, anger, resentment, grievances, guilt, shame, depression. They're the opposite. So healthy emotions when we feel connected, unhealthy when we feel separation. This is the emotional or limbic brain. It's only found in mammals, not in reptiles. So reptiles presumably don't have an emotional life, although people are questioning that now. Okay. The bulk of my brain is called the cortical or intellectual brain. And that's true of all humans, but also of primates. But we are different than primates in that we have symbolic ways to express ourselves and tell stories. So this is the biggest part of our brain. And from this brain, we created art and science and music and architecture and New York City and nation states and Wall Street and everything else. So a healthy brain is an integrated brain, where you use the instinctive brain only when you are in danger. You use the emotional brain to cultivate love in its highest expressions. And you use the intellectual brain to reflect. Who am I? What do I want? All this stuff. Okay? So now let's look at how we can actually create an enlightened brain. An enlightened brain means moving through these stages of consciousness and understanding that reality is different in different states of consciousness. So whatever you're experiencing right now is the waking state of consciousness. Okay, tonight you'll experience dreaming state, deep sleep, and most people won't experience the other states, but we are beginning that journey now. So as we experience these different states, our brain will change. That's called neuroplasticity. And slowly, neuroscience is beginning to acknowledge that. So our brain will change, our immune system will change, our endocrine system will change, and the way we see the world will change. And also those things that we call insight, intuition, imagination, creativity, higher consciousness, love, compassion, joy, all this will blossom by itself. Because your biology will transform, including your brain, as your consciousness transforms. Because consciousness is the only reality. Okay, so with that, and please, this is a complicated slide thing. I just finished it because I have a convention to go to called the Brain Mapping Convention. Believe it or not, there are 300,000 members of the Brain Mapping Convention. So that's one of the biggest projects in the world right now, is how do we map the brain? And not only how do we map the brain, how do we map the global brain? Because what is a good example of the global brain that we use every day? The internet. The internet is our planetary brain right now. Every human condition is right there. So we are extending our consciousness through artificial intelligence, through augmented reality, through the internet into a planetary brain. And if we want to change the planetary brain, we want to start with ourselves. So this is a complicated slide. It's meant for neuroscientists. Don't try to grasp everything right now here, but we'll go through it anyway. And it's good practice for me too. How do I? Okay. I guess I don't know how to use this. Okay, this is a diagram you'll find in the Healing Self, which is about our entire biology, from mind to brain. At the top is consciousness and then brain. And this is diagram thanks to Blake Gerfin, who's a neuroscientist at, is it Stanford? Where is it? UC San Francisco, and he's one of our collaborators. And he was very gracious to develop this diagram of the connection between brain, vagus nerve, all the organs, the immune system, the endocrine system. I'm not going to go through it, but here is our, how do we rewire our brain for these higher states of consciousness that I have just told you about. And these three brains, the instinctive brain, the emotional brain, and the intellectual brain. Okay, so these are three different brains that evolved over millions of years of time. So reptilian brain is 300 million years old. That's in the red. The emotional brain is 100 million years old. That's the one in the violet. And then, you know, it's that big blue thing. That's the intellectual brain that is only 4 million years old. So, but with that brain came cathedrals and ultimately artificial intelligence and everything else that we use today. So those are the three brains called the triune brain. We talked a lot about emotions this morning. So let's talk about them once again. Regulating your emotions changes the brain because your moods, your brain networks, your hormone levels, your heart rate, your immune function, your biological rhythms, your blood pressure, sleep-wake cycles, dreams, digestive processes, microbiome, all connected to your emotional well-being. If you're feeling scared, you're in fear, anger, inflammatory brain, inflammatory gut, inflammatory, everything. On the other hand, if you're emotionally feeling fulfilled and at peace, then that is what we call limbic regulation, which is regulating all these different aspects of your biology. Okay, so these are the techniques for higher consciousness. And I'm not going to elaborate too much, but let's go into the techniques. The first is reflective self-inquiry, asking yourself those questions we started with this morning. Who am I? Who wants to know? What do I want? What's my purpose? What am I grateful for? Those are the most important questions we can reflect on. The second aspect of this moving into higher consciousness is called non-reactivity, which means you only use your reptilian or midbrain when you need to. So when do you need to use that? Well, somebody mugs you in the night. You need to either run or knock the guy off. Okay, that's the best use of your reptilian brain. Or your house is on fire, you need to run out. So that brain goes back ancient times when you were about to be eaten by a tiger and you either killed the tiger or you ran. Okay, so non-reactivity. So here's an acronym that has become very popular since I first spoke about it in one of Oprah's Sunday programs. It's called STOP. S-T-O-P. So the acronym stands for those steps. Stop. You're stressed. Stop. Take 3 deep breaths. Smile. Should be there. Observe. What do you observe? Not what's happening there. Observe what's happening in your body. Okay, because whatever is happening there is also happening in your body. Symbolic interpretation of that being reflected in the symbolic representation of consciousness here. So you stop, you take 3 breaths, you observe what's happening. In other words, you pause, you put the pause button on. You're no longer a bundle of conditioned reflexes and nerves being triggered by people and circumstance. You are now taking control. So you stop, observe, smile, and then proceed with compassion and deliberate choice. You can do this with any impulse you have. You know, these days not many people smoke cigarettes, but I used to teach them. You have the urge to smoke, stop. Okay, smile, take a few deep breaths. Observe what that thought is doing to your body. You'll see your heart rate variability is changing. And now proceed. If you still want to smoke a cigarette, go ahead. But if you just take this pause, you might break the cycle. Same thing with any other addiction. Same thing with any other behavior. Because these behaviors that are so programmed into our emotional and reptilian brains are so programmed that unless you become aware of them, they keep recycling themselves. And they keep creating inflammation. Okay, so that's the stop. The fourth point there is cultivate divine emotions. These are called divine emotions in Eastern wisdom traditions. And these are gratitude, loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, peace. Number 5, non-judgmental awareness of both the internal and the external world. So Krishnamurti, who was a great Indian philosopher, used to say, the highest intelligence is the ability to observe yourself without judging yourself. Because when you get into the habit of observing yourself, which means yourself includes your body, yourself includes that which we call thought, self includes emotions, self includes every perception you're having. So when you are becoming the silent witness of experience without judging it, then transformation starts to happen. Now tomorrow, I believe on the program, we have a 1-hour meditation Most people don't have the patience to sit through 1 hour. But if you do, we'll go into this experience of how do you actually experience the whole gamut of experience. But that is what it says. Non-judgmental awareness of the internal world. Internal world is what? The body, what's happening inside the body, what's happening inside the mind, what's happening in the web of relationships. An external world, when you observe the external world without judgment, and by judgment I don't mean, you don't make good choices. Judgment doesn't mean, all we mean here is moral judgment. Moral judgment is just self-righteousness with a jealousy and a halo. Okay. Moral judgment is hypocrisy. Because, if you judge somebody, you ask yourself, am I capable of that? And you go really deep into it. There are situations where you might be capable of that. So moral judgment means nothing human is foreign to me. Period. Now, we make other judgments, choices, that's fine. Okay. Moral judgment means you haven't confronted your own shadows. Okay. So there's a sinner and a saint in everyone. Diabolical and divine in everyone. Sacred and profane in everyone. Otherwise, you're not human. So that's non-judgmental awareness. Interoception is the ability to know what's happening in your body. Okay, so in the great yogic traditions, and Eddie's here, I don't know, Sarah may have left. Are you here, Sarah? She left, she had to teach. Okay, so this is called pratyahara. Okay, one of the 8 limbs of yoga is to withdraw and know what's happening inside. And it's learned. Anybody can learn to do this. The next point here is transcendence. Transcendence means we go beyond subject-object split, which is subject-object split means I'm here, you're there, and there's a world. Actually, it's all one inseparable activity in one awareness. That's transcendence. Metacognition, it's a new word in science, in neuroscience. It means to be aware of experience as it's happening, but also to be aware of choices as you're making them. So all experience, sensory experience, mental experience, bodily experience, and so on. So if we practice this, this is what is called spiritual practice, in Sanskrit, sadhana. And we don't have to practice everything, but if we practice elements of this, we start to rewire our brain from waking, dreaming, deep sleep to soul consciousness, cosmic consciousness, divine consciousness, unity consciousness. Skip. For now, skip. I guess she sent the wrong slides. Is that all? Is that all you got? Yes. Okay. So now I'll have to wing it without the slides. Just go back to the slide with all the states of consciousness, okay? Get into the habit of not being reactive. And that's very simple. Stop formula. Number 1. Second, get into the habit of asking why you're doing whatever you're doing. If it's not motivated by love or joy or compassion, it's not worth doing. Third, start a mental practice every day of reflection. There's no question that doesn't have an answer. But here, the principle is the following. You do not need to know the answers. You need to live the questions. Not knowing is a high state of consciousness. Knowing, once you know something, there's nothing else to do. So live in the question. If you live in the questions, then life moves you into the answers. Either through synchronicity, or through intuition, or through a creative response. But sooner or later, life will move you into the answers. Live the questions. What do we say in Christian traditions? Ask and you shall receive. So whatever you want, that's really true prayer. Is to say, what do I want? Not as a demand, but as a request, or not even as a request, as a question. What do I want? So live the most important questions. It doesn't matter what those questions are. Should I invest in this project? Should I do this? Ask the question and let it go and trust your gut, trust your heart, trust whatever happens. So reflection. The next thing is, stop once in a while just to ask the question, am I aware? Also, before you sleep at night, and this is a practice that's very interesting and very ancient, it's a practice called recapitulation. So before you sleep at night, before you actually fall off to sleep, I'll tell you what I do, okay? So what I do is two things. One is I recapitulate the day. So I on the screen of my consciousness, I observe whatever happened during the day, not in detail. No, you can close your eyes and you can say, you can see on the screen of your consciousness, you woke up, you brushed your teeth, you went to work, you were in the grocery store when you got annoyed when somebody cut the line or whatever. You just observe the whole thing. And then you say to yourself, that's a dream now, right? Everything that happened today, by tonight, will be a dream. And you let it go. Because there's no way to grasp that. It's finished. It's over. And then you do something else. You say to yourself, just as I witnessed my waking dream, I will witness my sleeping dreams and my sleep. Nothing may happen in the beginning. But sooner or later, there'll be a wakefulness to the deep sleep and the dream state. You start to have a little bit of experience of what is happening during sleep. It gets better and better, so even sleep and dream state becomes vivid. What's the value of that? The value of that is you realize by yourself that you're not your body, nor are you the mind. You are the witnessing awareness in which that is happening. And it's happening in deep sleep, it's happening in dreams, it's happening now. Your body and mind are symbolic representations of you and how you interpret what's happening. So witnessing awareness starts to get refined in deep sleep, in dreams, and in wakefulness. Now, if you want, you can also, when you wake up, you can try and see if you can recall the dream. It may come, it may not, but as you practice it, it will come, okay? And then as you recall the dream, you also let it go. You let go the waking dream, you let go the night dream. All that remains is the witnessing awareness. Witnessing awareness is who we are. It's our spirit, it's our soul, and it's now getting refined and refined and refined. And then in my own practice, I also do my version of Yoga Nidra, which I've shared with you. So yoga means union. Yoga means union with your spirit, with your soul, with your awareness. And yoga nidra means yoga while asleep. Okay. So what is yoga nidra? I'll tell you what my practice is, but there are other versions of this too, okay? So my practice is I sit up in bed after doing all the recapitulation, all the stuff I did, I share with you right now. My practice is that I first keep my eyes open, but to get the best quality of sleep, make sure that your room is absolutely dark. Okay. Also, as much absence of sound. Also, temperature little cool. So, say 68 degrees, 70 degrees, but not over that. Because when the temperature is high, sleep is interfered with. So, little cool, dark room, and no sound. And you just look around. You look at your body, you look at around, and slowly in the dark, you will see shapes, colors, maybe slight color. Okay? So you're experiencing without the symbols. This is a tree, this is a painting, this is the wall. All you're experiencing is shapes and colors and forms, which is raw experience before it becomes a symbol. Raw experience is shape, color, and form. And by the way, they're the same thing. The only difference between this as a form and that as a form and that as a form is the color and the shape. Otherwise, it's all one. Right? So form arises because of color, shape, and that's essentially the experience which we call seeing. Once you start saying shoe, microphone, flowers, that's symbolic representation of seeing. So in the dark you see whatever you see. Then you close your eyes and then you hear sounds. When you are experiencing seeing with the way I'm showing you right now, then you don't have a dominant experience of sound. But when you start to focus on sound, you suddenly start experiencing it. Even in a quiet room, there's a hum of the air conditioner, there's the sound of your breathing, there's some rustling of the bed sheet. So you just focus on that. Then you let it go, and the next thing you experience is sensations in your body. Now, when your eyes are closed and you're not focusing on sound, and you close your eyes, then what do you feel? The only knowledge you have of your body then is sensations. And there's sensation of your body touching the bed, but there's also sensations coming from inside. And they're all kind of intermittent, so you focus on that. And then you let that go. And you become aware of your breath, which is also a sensation. Okay, so every experience is a sensation, by the way. There's nothing else. We call it the world, the body, and the mind, but every experience is a sensation that is generated in consciousness, that is experienced in consciousness, and that subsides in consciousness. So now you focus on the breath, and as you focus on the breath, you can even do some resonant breathing at that point, but then slowly you see the breath quietening, and then you just settle into awareness, which we've now learned how to do. Okay? Who or what is having this experience? You settle into awareness, non-symbolic. You lie down, and you're now settling in what we call infinite awareness, non-symbolic awareness, being, existence. Slowly, that awareness will start to wake up in waking, dreaming, and sleeping, moving from fourth state, Turiya, to Turiya Tattva, to divine consciousness, to unity consciousness. What I had in my slides was how the brain changes when we do this. And it's amazing that the whole brain starts to shift. Now, this is a work in progress. I did not bring all the slides. In a way, it's good because I prepared them for the Brain Mapping Society. But Paul Mills, can you come for 1 second here and share what we're doing with the brain mapping right now at University of California, San Diego. And then we'll call it an evening.
So this is a project we're just launching at UC San Diego, as Deepak said. If you know any of the meditation research literature, you know there's a lot of studies out there on various forms of mantra meditation, mindfulness, particularly the last decade or so. So at UCSD, we're going to start the first time ever research project on the primordial sound meditation program that Deepak developed at the Chopra Center many years ago. So that's one novel piece, but the other piece is the functional magnetic resonance center that we're working with now is capable of simultaneously measuring EEG, which is what most meditation studies have historically done, and fMRI simultaneously. So we're going to start mapping out what are the classic changes in EEG brain waves during meditation, such as shifts to alpha or theta, depending on the hemisphere, and the functional and structural changes in activity in the brain itself. That hasn't been done. So that's what we're launching actually this month.
We're launching this month. It's been approved by IRB.
Yeah, the IRB, we're ready to go.
So you have to go through a whole process to get approval. It's called IRB, Institutional Review Board, so it's all done. We're going to launch this. But see, what is becoming so clear is there are two things happening when we practice these technologies. One is neurogenesis, which means you actually increase the number of neurons in your body. And the other is called synaptogenesis, which means you change the connections in your body. If enough of us do this, that will be reflected in the planetary brain that we call the internet. It is a brain, because if you said somebody, let's say you send somebody an emoticon with a hug and a kiss through Instagram or whatever, they get a dopamine hit. That's why people go there. Some people are adrenaline junkies. They like to be abused. That's what the trolls are doing. So our internet is, in fact, our planetary brain now, and it won't change unless we go through the personal change that we need to go. So that was what I wanted to share with you this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you. You have my phone.
I do. Deepak, we're almost done with you. Not quite yet. We are just going to invite Fred Matzer from the Fred Foundation back up, and Bernardo Castro, you're here somewhere, and Deepak back up on stage for one final moment to just wrap up the evening for final thoughts and words today. Thank you so much all for being here today. And one last time for the day, thank you, Deepak and Fred, for hosting us today. And Fred, why don't you start with just some final words and thoughts from the day, and then Deepak, if you have any last thoughts of the day, and you as well, Bernardo. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. First of all, I do not want to this time to do a quick thank you. I'm really very grateful to Deepak to be my friend for many years, and to allow and have allowed us to bring this whole group of wonderful people together. I thank you so much. And in your team, I wanted to thank, of course, Susie, Amanda, and the whole team of Wealth Collective. I say it well, I hope, huh? Good. I mean, without you, as well as Artjan from the Fred Foundation, who has spent many, many hours in cooperation with Susie and her team to make these 1.5 days a real wonderful experience, hopefully for all of you. The cooking, I mean, the whole arrangement, the flowers. I like to thank Alice, who came from far away, especially. There are many people from New York, but you took the time to fly in 2.5, 3 hours. Paul, where are you? You came from far away. Where's Paul? Here. Thank you so much, especially. And, of course, our whole Dutch group, including Iris, Artjan again, Johan, our board member of the Fred Foundation, thank you. Thank you very much. Jaap and Hugo for coming over here. And I'm most grateful that this all could happen, and without you, it wouldn't have been possible. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. Now, I think I mentioned that in the very beginning. My concern is that through the ratio, expressed amongst others through all kind of IT interventions, that the ratio risks to hijack through the brain the mind. But the big mind doesn't only go through the ratio, it also goes through the heart. We discussed the heart earlier this morning. The heart is the feminine side, into the outside world expressed through women. Women stand for vulnerability. Alas, often rational people see vulnerability as a weakness. But I want to do an appeal on you to honor vulnerability. There is no life without vulnerability. And although today we had many moments of silence, we have been talking also a lot. But let's all remember that without silence, life would not be possible. There's a song, the Ave Maria, sung by Noah. And somewhere in that song, it is the way I listen to it, it is about the importance of the feminine principle. That Noah, being a Jewish singer, singing a Christian song, says, "But who is standing forward?" And silently I heard, to represent me, the power of silence. And then I realized, when we would give the silence an ambassador, it starts to speak and the silence is over. So silence only recognizes itself. And please, when you would go home, either today or tomorrow, try to remind yourself and one another about the importance of silence. And basically, under all this, what is behind us, the SBTI principle, the fundamental power, perhaps, is silence. Earlier, I had a question about birth. Later on, I realized the birth canal is an expression of the feminine. But who could tell us, how do we birth into death? So through the feminine principle, we enter life in its physical form. But when we leave life, we go into that area where you may have come from, where there is no address, where it's just trust. How is that painful? Maybe it's only the suffering because we fear the moment to really let go. And from many experiences you may have read of near-death experiences, most of them are very, very valuable experiences where people feel being loved, being into a kind of field, a huge womb of unconditional love. And knowing that, I have to stop, I see it. It is very important to indeed, through life, realize that we can trust something that we cannot find through a navigator. Now, I would call that unconditional love. So my final sentence is, the way I am convinced that life is about is It is about the development of our consciousness to experience and understand unconditional love and trust in that. Thank you very much.
I was expecting to ask the two of you questions, but I will wrap up in a different way very briefly. Those who know me know that I come from a very different world than what I see here today, a very, well, much less friendly world than you are. A world, as Freddie alluded to just now, dominated by rationality, the ratio that you alluded to, where we are all busy coming up with conceptual explanations for everything, which may be valid, may not be valid, you may be convinced of them, but they are not transformative. They will not change your life, even if you're fully convinced of them. What changes lives is direct experience, direct acquaintance with the truths that we lost contact with. And I think this is what these two gentlemen bring to the mix, is that direct acquaintance with something that they're trying to convey, and the ability to help you get there yourself. I don't have that at all. Often I sit in awe next to the two of them, a little bit of envy too, I confess to that, because I suffer more than they do, I think, due to my inability to mirror that ability. But I think I'm sitting next to two very, very positive forces in the world today that, despite their fame, are still underestimated in many, many segments of society. And from that perspective, I'm privileged, and I think you are all privileged to be here today.
I just want to conclude by saying that everything that we experienced today is on Facebook. It's going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on Twitter. It's going to live there, so you can come back to it. And this is a way for us to reinforce our experience. And the last thing I want to say is that this whole journey is about dropping our defenses. Every defense, every rationality, every excuse, every theory in the end has to be dropped. It's peeling all the layers of assumed identity till we get to fundamental reality, the awareness in which the whole universe is being experienced right now. So, quoting Rumi for the last time today, if you're not naked by now, go back to sleep.